Welcome back to the Champagne on Ice podcast presented by the Field of 68. And Illinois suffers an absolute heartbreaker to number one Tennessee as Jordan Gainey goes coast to coast in 5.7 seconds, 5.7 very fateful seconds to knock off Illinois, survive the upset bid in Champaign, and prevent what would have been a pretty magical court storm at State Farm Center as Illinois goes down 66-64 to the number one team in the country. And there is a ton to talk about from this game, and we're going to do it all right here. I'm Kyle Tausk, joined as always by Mike Farmer. And has the pain of that loss seeped away now 2 days later yet?
It has. I've had some time to digest and kind of unpack what happened. I mean, I was pissed off like every Illinois fan was as soon as that game ended, especially being there, having to walk back home after that disastrous couple seconds at the end. But I mean, I'll talk a lot about this today. It's a young team. Like this is stuff like that is kind of what you expect from a team that has 10 newcomers, a bunch of freshmen, guys that just have never played college basketball at this level before. So it sucked. I mean, it did hurt, but I'm good now.
Yeah, I feel like there's kind of two different ways to look at it. On one hand, you repeat some of the same things, and they're all true, that this was to be expected. Early December, you're playing such an experienced team like Tennessee that, yeah, you're going to fumble away some late game moments, and there's going to be some growing pains late in games and these tight game situations. All that's to be expected and understandable. And on the other side, you can still be really disappointed that Illinois should have won that game. Illinois absolutely at home with two of Tennessee's top guards fouled out. One of them fouled out at the under four, Chaz Lanier, their leading scorer. And with Illinois having the lead down the stretch of the game, turning it over 3 times in the last 2 minutes and giving up a coast-to-coast bucket is very disappointing result. And there were a lot of things that Illinois could have done to win that game, and it's going to be a loss that stings because that would have been a massive resume win. But, I mean, look, Illinois fought till the end of this game on a night where they were absolutely awful offensively. Now, Tennessee was equally as awful. It was a really ugly game to watch. Both teams deserve a lot of credit for that defensively. I thought both teams were really good on that end. The refs took the game over in the first half with just a whistle fest. Eased off it a little bit in the second half, but it was as physical a game as you would expect. But Illinois had a chance to win this game, had many chances to win this game. Felt like when they went up 6 with, I think, 4-something minutes left in the game. I forget when that was. I mean, maybe it's a little deeper in the half, but they were up 4 late and up 6. Well, pretty short time remaining in the game, and they could not get it done. So how do you choose to view this game? Do you take away from this game saying, hey, you know what? Illinois fought till the end with the number one team in the country, and for this young team, that's all I can ask for. Or is there some real disappointment and frustration at not being able to get it done?
There's both. I mean, there's definitely both. But personally, I lean more towards the first side, the more positive side, saying this is a young team that did manage to stick with arguably the best team in the country, probably a top 2 or 3 team in the country, depending on how you look at it. And it's a team like you said, the game was just the first half. The first half to me was a wash. Like I'm gonna pretend that half did not exist because that was the most despicable display of officiating I think I've seen in person, at least in my time as a college basketball fan. Like I think it was 26 fouls in 20 minutes. 11 different players had 2+ fouls or 2 or more fouls in the first half alone.
Every
Uh,
starter on Illinois had 2 fouls in the first half. I mean,
I
come
mean,
on
like
now.
some of them, I get you have to call some fouls, like obviously, but the amount of ticky tack and just fouls that straight up did not exist that were called was mind-boggling. Like, and then in the second half, they just completely pretty much stopped calling fouls. Like, it made zero sense. But back to your point, I'm more positive about this. The last couple minutes, obviously, that was terrible. You can blame Brad Underwood, you can blame players themselves. We'll get into that more later. But I think overall, like you've seen the flashes that this team has shown. You've seen just how much talent there is, even with a super young roster, an inexperienced roster, guys that are in their first year of college basketball playing against guys that are playing against a Tennessee team with an average age of like 22 years old. So it was crazy. I mean, the game itself, like, there's a lot of different things to look at, but overall, I'm coming out of this one with a pretty positive attitude still.
The thing that impressed me most about it was it looked like Illinois absolutely met the style of game that it was needed to be. I would not have expected if you told me this game was going to be a game where Illinois shot 29% from the floor, and there was a ton of fouls called, and it was a defensive battle in the 60s, a pretty slow-paced game, and a really physical Tennessee-like game. I'd say, wow, I'm very worried about how that went for this young Illinois team. And they stood up to that. I mean, physically, they matched Tennessee. They went right at them. They adjusted to the way the game was being called, which was very tight. I just can't stand that. When you have a team like Tennessee and really Illinois, the way that they stepped up and played as well, when you know it's going to be just a beat 'em up type of game, we can't be calling the ticky-tack stuff where guys are like a little minor hand check on the perimeter, guys moving their feet. That the first half was ridiculous on that front, but I thought Illinois handled the physicality of Tennessee. Not necessarily handled it great offensively. I mean, I think offense was hard to come by for both teams, but they matched it on the other end themselves. Defensively, I thought Illinois played really, really well, and was able to hang in a game that fit exactly how Tennessee wanted to play it. And that's what I would have been very concerned about. I thought Illinois would have to get to 80 some, maybe to beat this team or close to it, or at least make a bunch of shots, and they couldn't make anything. And they still gave themselves a chance to win. Now, Tennessee probably had one of their worst games, but again, I think Illinois deserves a lot of credit for that. This team's playing really well defensively right now. And you kind of just look at this team as a whole, and it's the exact opposite of where I would have thought this team would be at right now in mid-December, where you got a defense that's pushing top 10 in the country. You've put together 3 straight really quality defensive performances, really 4 straight quality defensive performances against high major teams, including a Tennessee offense that, yeah, they're obviously known for their defense under Rick Barnes here recently, but that was a top 10 offense coming into the game with 4 scorers averaging double digits, and Illinois held them down. And yet the problem with this team right now, and the biggest concern with this team, which I'm not all that concerned about long term, and we'll talk about a lot of different things regarding it, but the biggest concern with Illinois right now is they can't score. Late in the game, they can't score unless Kaspers Yakichonis is putting in 4-point plays or making something happen off the dribble. They just don't have answers offensively. It was a really, really poor finish to the game offensively for Illinois. They got it going a little bit midway through the second half, and they did not make a shot in the final 4:55 of this game. In fact, they only got 2 up. And obviously they got to the free throw line a ton in this game, which is a positive. But in terms of shot making, they made 15 shots in this game, and KJ was pretty much your only offense yet again. When you look back at the Northwestern game, it was the same story. So it's just a weird place for this team to be at, because you tell me in October which side of the ball is way ahead of the other come mid-December, I'm telling you, absolutely, this team's probably scoring 80 to 90 a game, but they can't stop anybody. And right now it's kind of the opposite. They can't score it right now.
Yeah, like you look back to the first time we saw this team in action, which was the Ole Miss exhibition, and that Ole Miss team was kind of similar to this Tennessee team, just a ton of veterans, super physical, just gritty team. And Illinois was totally outmatched, like just outclassed on both ends. The offense looked scared. They were getting just, I don't know, like this Ole Miss was incredibly physical. Illinois didn't really look like they belong. And then it's been 2 months now, and Illinois manages to really knock back down against a similar team in Tennessee. And that was honestly one of my like big takeaways, like you said too. They just didn't back down. Like the offense, there were definitely possessions offensively where you could tell, all right, Illinois is kind of quitting here. They're kind of scared to go to the rim. We're just going to pass it around for 20 seconds, which kind of plays into the offense not being that good. But overall, like Illinois didn't back down. They were in the game the whole time. The game was just back and forth, and we haven't really seen that much of that from this team, considering there's only been 10 games. There's haven't been a ton of opportunities for a rock fight, a back and forth game like that. But yeah, they definitely didn't quit. And yeah, offensively, I think I'm gonna say this now. I've been looking at some stats recently, and I think 3-point shooting is my biggest concern. I'm like you, I'm not gonna say it's a major concern for the next 3 months of the season, but it has to be on the radar right now because they've played 5 high major games Against Arkansas, they shot 15 of 31 from three-point range. The other four games, Alabama, Northwestern, Wisconsin, and Tennessee, they've shot 27.5% from three. That is like probably the worst in the country if that was a full season, over the course of a full season. Will Riley himself has shot 4 for 21 in high major games, and he's 1 for 17 when you're not including his 3 for 4 game versus Bama. Ben Hummerkaus has made 3 of his last 18 three-point shots. Kylan Boswell is only shooting 21% on the year, including 4 for 21 against high major teams. And this is, I'm going to mention this, Dre Gibbs Lawhorn against high major teams in his career. Guess what he's shooting from three?
It's probably in the teens.
3 for 25, 12%. I know he's a sophomore. Like we've said this a lot that he's kind of put in the game and has to just put his one shot up. But I mean, all those stats combined, that's pretty concerning for a team that's shooting a ton of threes. Because I found this stat on KenPom as well. They're shooting 32.4% from three this year in 10 games, but they're shooting at the eighth highest rate in the country. That 32.4% is the 208th best rate or best three-point percentage in the country. It's kind of similar to the team 2 years ago where you had Jaden Epps, Matthew Meyer, even TSJ Coleman, these guys that just weren't great shooters that year, and they were chucking it up at crazy rates. They shot 31% that year, which was 335th in the nation, but they shot at the 64th highest rate in terms of three-point shots per field goal attempts. So I think this just has to be on the radar. The Arkansas game was great. Big T got going. I think KJ had a couple threes. Like guys found their rhythm. Ben Hummerkaus was great in that game. But other than that, like it's starting to become a trend it's noticeable. Because you look at Northwestern, it's KJ doing all the work. Wisconsin, nobody's hitting shots. Alabama was just pretty sloppy overall. And then Tennessee, they shot 4 for 23 from three, I want to say. Two of those made threes were KJ on and ones and 4-point plays. The other two were a Trey White three in the second half. And then Ben Hummerkaus has 1 3 in the first 2 minutes of the game. So, I mean, I had to throw that out there. Like I said, it has to be on the radar. I'm not writing them off as a great three-point shooting team, but we have to at least mention it at this point in the season.
I'm so glad you brought that up because that's exactly where I was going to go, and you had all the stats that I was going to bring up as well. But it really is when you're dissecting what is the biggest issue with this offense right now. It's that they're not a good shooting team at this point, and they were built to be a really good shooting team. This offense was designed for a really good shooting team, and it's been bad. It really has been since the beginning of the year. They're outside the top 300 in three-point shooting since those first three bye games. So it's just I don't place a ton of weight into a guy like Ben Hummerkaus being in a slump and a guy like Will Riley being in a slump. Like some of the shots they're getting will start to go in. I do think that there is an issue overall with this team right now in the quality of shot they're getting. I just don't think the quality of shot has been very good against high major competition for the most part. We saw early in the year in some of these early bye games how it felt like Illinois had an open catch and shoot look from three almost every time down the floor. And it feels like a lot of these shots, while yes, there's some uncharacteristic shooting going on, especially from Hummerkaus. So I do think a lot of his shots have been fairly open. Some of the looks, like Will Riley especially, I think he's slumping a little bit, but his shots are really hard. Like all of his shots are really hard. And for him, I just think you need to try and get him more open looks to start to rebuild some confidence. Feels like everything with him is he's catching, putting it on the ground and trying to create instead of catching and shooting or being a guy spaced in the corner who's going to get a catch and shoot three, or he's going to come off a screen and try to get fouled on a three-point attempt and kind of kick his leg out. He's mastered the Reggie Miller kick your leg out and get a call move, and they've never called him for an offensive foul on it. I wouldn't rely on that all year. I want him to just actually focus on shooting the ball, making the shot, which it feels like he's making shots tougher than they have to be. And Kylan Boswell, like he's missed some open shots. He's going to start shooting it well, but he also just takes some poor threes. Like it feels like he's in his head a little bit to where he'll take a pretty, 4 or 5 feet behind the 3-point line out of rhythm early in the shot clock. And those just aren't good shots. And really other than KJ, it's just the shot quality for Illinois has not been very good. And so I think while they're still taking a lot of threes, they haven't been the same quality of shot that they were getting early in the year. Even though they're coming from your better shooters, I think that's complicating some things. And the other thing really too is that you just don't have a guy other than KJ who can create a shot right now. And that's one of the things, especially coming down late in the game. It feels like Illinois' offense in a lot of possessions is KJ do something special for us, and that's it. And I mean, and if it's not going to happen, it's not going to happen. Illinois just doesn't have that second guy. I mean, Kylan's shown some ability to at least attack and get fouled, but Benham Rickhouse not doing anything other than spotting up and shooting. Will Riley's just getting cut off right now, and he's struggling with some more physical, lengthy defenders. He's just not getting to his spots like he was early in the year, which is to be expected. That was a big concern we had, is to be expected of him as he adjusts to that. But every shot he's taken is hard. So I don't know. I think Illinois is going to need to use this week before Braggin Rights to maybe just add some more structure to this offense for the time being. You can still be a ball screen heavy team with KJ, but I think you need to add maybe some set plays or just a little bit more structured offense to try and get better looks from three, because we know this team can be a good shooting team, but you got to get back to getting the quality of shots they were getting early in the year, which right now in kind of their unstructured, free-flowing, KJ-led offense, they're just not getting those same looks right now.
I'll ask you this. Do you think there's a major correlation between KJ's scoring taking off? He's had 5 straight 20-point games, and then like you're talking about, kind of a lack of open looks for the rest of the guys, a lack of in-rhythm shots in the corners from the great three-point shooters like Riley and Humrickhouse. Like, do you think that's super correlated, or is that something to be worried about, or what do you think?
I think it can be a little bit. I think honestly, I think KJ's increase in scoring has been out of necessity because he's the only answer for Illinois. Like, I think there's a give and take there to where, yeah, he's a really good shot maker and he's a guy that can go score it, but the ideal spot to be is him giving you 15 and 9 instead of 24 and 4, because that means that you're really running quality offense and guys are getting good looks. I do feel like part of his scoring outbreak here has been he's the only guy Illinois can turn to in times where they're just not getting anything else. I mean, the Northwestern game was a great example of that. It was, he's going to make a shot or we're not scoring down the floor here. And when teams are taking away ball screens, it's really just KJ going one-on-one with a guy. I don't know. I do feel like the assist numbers have been down for KJ a little bit here too. And it's not his fault. It's more so a product of Illinois' offense, like I said, just being so reliant on one or two things that I feel like they need to diversify it a little bit and take a little bit of pressure off of KJ as a scorer.
They do, especially in late game too, because you look at these pass spread Underwood teams, you had the pretty much the established guy to go to in late game situations. TSJ the past couple of years, IO, even Kofi on the side. And then, but you also had supplementary guys like Trent Frazier could knock down the big shot. Marcus Damask last year, Coleman hit some big shots. This year, you just have not really seen that. Like, I think the biggest shot of the game, if you want to call it a shot, was Ben Humrickhaus's putback dunk, which is which was his one 2-point attempt in the past like 4 games.
And his
So,
only
you
rebound
definitely
of his
his
30
only
minutes.
rebound too. That's right. Yeah, that's just insane. Whatever, man. Uh, but yeah, you just need some more action going on besides KJ, especially in these last 10 minutes of the games, because it's getting to a point where it's just him or nothing. Like it's I guess the last game it was free throws. It was pretty much free throws or a turnover for the last like 5 or 6 minutes of the game. And that's something that's not really a winning formula, especially against a really good team like Tennessee. And in this upcoming Big Ten slate against Missouri too, like we're kind of getting to a point where we need some guys to get going and pretty fast too. So I don't know if that's going to be Kylan Boswell starting to get to the hoop more and starting to knock down threes. Maybe Big T gets back in rhythm, because we did not see much of Big T this game, or we saw him against Wisconsin a little bit, but he was quieter. But yeah, I don't know, you need some more action, some more guys just getting into flows, especially in the last 5, 6 minutes of the game.
the one thing that they have done consistently really well this year is get to the free throw line, and that's not something that shouldn't go unnoticed because that is massive for a team that is going to rely on a lot of 3-point attempts. Being able to get to the free throw line consistently is a positive, and I do feel like a lot of guys on this team have been really good at getting downhill and getting fouled, and that's important. Obviously, KJ leads that, but I think Kylan and Trey have done that at a nice level here too, but you need more than that. That can't be your only pivot when your primary source of offense is shut off. It can't be, okay, we're going to just drive and try to draw contact, because you're not always going to get that contact. Like, if you're going to put your entire offense in the hands of the way the game's being officiated, you're not going to always get 36 free throw attempts. These officials were calling a lot in this game. It's going to be a game where guys don't call anything, and all of a sudden you got nothing. You got to be able to generate good shots. That can't be the only thing. I know Brad Underwood has wanted this team to get to the free throw line, and that's a big thing, but there needs to be more shot making. 15 made shots in this game is a putrid number. It's putrid, and you got to do better than that, and you got to generate better shots. And for a team that has as good a shooters as they have, getting those guys the right shots is really what's important to me. Let's dissect a little bit of the late game stuff here, because that's really where this game was lost for Illinois. Start by saying, obviously, the 5.7 seconds in which Jordan Gainey goes coast to coast and beats you was a tough possession. It was a very bad defensive sequence for Illinois. Go back and watch that. It's painful to watch how out of sorts Illinois was. Brad Underwood made a major mistake not calling a timeout there, and he admitted just as much the second he got into postgame, which you appreciate, but that's a bad mistake. Like, there's a lot of unfair criticism of Brad Underwood out there. Being upset that he pocketed a timeout there after KJ made the free throw, extremely valid criticism. Very, very poor mistake to not call a timeout there, because you look at that possession and, man, Kylan Boswell being on Jemai Meshack and out of the play, a non-offensive threat instead of guarding the ball is bad. KJ being backpedaling the entire way down the floor. Tomislav Ivicic not even attempting to show help and come contest the shot, instead going and boxing out his guy when there's no time left. Trey White is up there pressuring Igor Milicic as the outlet guy and basically taking himself out of the play, trailing the play. I mean, it just was a pile of bad for Illinois on that possession, and you needed a timeout there to get things settled. But that wasn't the only issue down the stretch. Illinois had two sideline out-of-bounds plays. The first one, KJ throws it away. Igor Milicic picks it off and takes it the other way for a dunk. The second one, Trey White throws it almost out of bounds into the backcourt with 8 on the shot clock, and KJ has to scramble and try to frantically drive and get stripped and turns it over. And Illinois, as I mentioned earlier, didn't make a shot for the final 4:55 after Benham Rickhouse came out of nowhere and flew in for a tip dunk that I had absolutely zero idea was in his bag. Illinois did not make a shot after that. They attempted 2. Now, they got to the free throw line 4 times, so they had 4 field goal attempts that they were fouled on that don't count as field goal attempts. I get that, but 2 true field goal attempts in the final 4:55 of the game for Illinois, 0 made, and those 2 costly inbounds turnovers, and then obviously the last possession. There was a lot that went wrong down the stretch there. I think what it boils down to is this is a team that hasn't been there before. That's clearly what it is, but that was bad. It was Illinois gave this game away late, and it was pretty tough sequence there down the stretch when it felt like Illinois had every opportunity to win.
Yeah, you hit on a lot of the stuff that we had to hit on, a lot of stuff I wanted to talk about. I'm actually going to start with the Illinois' final offensive possession of the game, which was, I'm pulling up the clip right now because I'm kind of forgetting what happened.
It was totally out of sorts.
It was abysmal. It was
horrible.
A
total bailout foul.
And that's exactly what we've been talking about this episode and the past 2 months at this point, of Illinois just being young, being kind of immature and not really sure what to do in these late game situations, because it's KJ or bust at this point. So I'm pulling up the clip right now. Ziegler misses the free throw. Will Riley flies in for the rebound and like immediately throws it forward to Ben Hummerkaus, like who's about to run out of bounds almost. Hummerkaus whips it back to Boswell. Boswell dribbles up, loses it. KJ grabs it, eventually gets fouled. That all happens in like a 8 second span, which was just, I mean, that's like three near turnovers in 8 seconds in the final 15 seconds of the game. It somehow worked out. Obviously not in the end, but they did get points out of it. They tied the game up with KJ's one free throw. But that's just unbelievable. And then the 5 seconds after that, KJ backpedaling the whole possession. Underwood doesn't call a timeout. Like you said, Boswell was on Meshack, a non-shooter, our best defender. Granted, I mean, Gainey has a bit of a height advantage on Boswell, but Boswell has to be on Jordan Gainey. Gainey had pretty much all of Tennessee's points in the second half, besides Meshack's couple of layups, I think, and free throws too.
And even if he's not, someone's got to go get the ball. Don't backpedal until he's beating you in the paint. Go pick up the basketball, whether it's KJ or anybody. Somebody guard the ball.
And then Trey White, like being on the backcourt and like pressuring somebody that didn't have the ball, that kind of made sense, but I don't know. And then Tomislav Ivicic not going for a contest when there was like 1.5 seconds on the clock. Gainey's going full speed at this point. Like he's not going to throw behind the back pass to whoever the center was. I forget who it was. I mean, just terrible on all fronts. But like in the end, that made layup was still kind of a tough shot. Like it was, I don't know. Like he had to switch hands and go under KJ's arm. Not the shot you want defensively, but still kind of tough.
Probably a pretty high percentage shot, though, for an athlete like Gainey and a guy with that experience. I mean, he got to the rim. To let a guy
True.
get to the rim with no contest, with 5.7 seconds left. Again, really, the fault on that play goes to Brad Underwood. He said as much. You got to get a timeout there. You want to set your defense. You want to make sure everybody's in the right spot. You want to sub in Merez Johnson for Tomislav Ivicic. Give yourself some rim protection. That's one thing that would have been nice to have there. I guarantee you Merez is doing everything he can to swat that shot into the fifth row, which really, I mean, that's the thing. The angle in which the shot was taken at, all Ivicic has to do is contest it, and it's not going. He's probably going to block the shot, or it's going, into a brick wall. I mean, the angle was tough enough that all
He
of
was
these
like under the rim. Yeah.
was contested, but that's just one of those situations. Is what it is. Mistake. Brad Underwood didn't call timeout. It's a bad mistake. It's one that hurts. But I think that's something, obviously, you get in that situation again, I'd expect it to go a lot differently. But really, even besides that play, it was, like you said, there's nothing happening offensively on that last possession when you miss the free throw. The inbounds turnovers are frustrating. I know a lot of people are going to pin that on Brad Underwood and the coaching staff. I think part of that's fair, but at the same time, you look at that first inbounds play, it was just a lazy pass by KJ. That's really all it was. They've ran that same sideline out of bounds play a lot where Ivicic goes to screen and then pops out as kind of the inbound guy, and he's going to catch it and hand it back off to KJ and try to get him to his left hand going towards the middle of the floor, and KJ just threw a really lazy bounce pass. It's a young player making a bad mistake there. I don't know what was happening on the second inbounds pass. On second inbounds play, there wasn't a whole lot going on there, and then there was just a terrible pass attempt. Again, you didn't have any obvious place to go offensively when you needed a bucket down the stretch. Give them credit. They got to the free throw line a few times. Kylan Boswell had a strong drive where he got to the foul line, missed one of the free throws, which is another thing. You miss two free throws down the stretch there. You make both of those, and all Gainey's layup does is send it to overtime. But it just feels like coming down the stretch of games, and you saw it against Northwestern, now you see it against Tennessee. Where does Illinois turn if not for KJ heroics on possessions that matter? Where does Illinois go offensively unless KJ's bailing them out with a big-time NBA level play? And that's just not always going to happen. And against a team like Tennessee who had physical defenders hounding him all night, Jemai Meshack is an elite defender, was hounding KJ all night. Considering that, I thought KJ played pretty dang well, even though his line doesn't look all that impressive aside from the point total. But you got to take some pressure off the guy. You got to be able to have somewhere to go late in the game. And Illinois just felt like there was nothing happening offensively down the stretch at all.
Yeah, I completely agree, obviously. I think Boswell's got to do more, especially late in games. As that secondary ball handler, you see like with Meshack and even when Ziegler was still in the game, just so much pressure's on KJ. excuse me, so much pressure is on KJ, and not even just in the Tennessee game, Wisconsin, Northwestern. He has all the responsibility in the final couple minutes of the game. And that's a lot, even for a really talented 18-year-old that's probably going top 10 in the draft. It's a lot. Like, there's just so much pressure. He's being forced to distribute the ball when he has to, and also just create for himself, take a bunch of step back threes, which he's really good at. But still, like, it's just too much. I think a guy like Boswell, who's in his third year now, even a guy like Trey White, if he's in the game, just you got to do a little bit more. Big T has not done a whole lot the last two games. And I feel like he's not super involved late in games in general, not even just the last two games. So yeah, I think there's answers that got to come from somewhere else besides the 18-year-old freshman in KJ.
Absolutely, yeah. Um, Other things here, yeah. Rickhouse is just struggling big time right now, and really, the thing with him now, and we bring him up on every episode now. I don't mean to go into another conversation. The fact of the matter is, 1 rebound in 30 minutes is ridiculous. Like you can't that's just unacceptable. For as much as both of us, I think, pushed back on a lot of the Ben Humrickhouse vitriol in the last episode, and I still maintain a lot of what I said in terms of, look, this guy's going to start making shots, especially if Illinois can get him some better looks in the flow of their offense. But even in general, some of the shots he's missed, those are going to go in. You need him on the floor offensively. He's still going to be a big part of this rotation, but he does deserve to lose some minutes if he's going to get you 1 rebound in 30 minutes. 1 rebound in 30 minutes, 0 defensive rebounds, and you could notice some of the defensive rebounds he didn't get because Igor Milicic had 14 boards in this game, 5 offensive rebounds. 3 or 4 of those were directly on Ben Humrickhouse in a one-on-one box-out opportunity. Humrickhouse gets beat for an offensive rebound. That's effort. I mean, that's just going out there, putting a body on somebody and rebounding, using your 6'9" size, your 6'9". You need to give Illinois better on the glass. I do think there deserves to be some criticism of Ben here in this game because 1 rebound, you can't have that. I think if you're going to give 1 rebound in 30 minutes, now we start to have a different conversation and say, okay, some of these minutes probably do have to go elsewhere because that's just, it hurt Illinois. Tennessee had 17 offensive rebounds. I thought a lot of those were because of Ben, and really I thought Trey White had a really bad rebounding game too, but that's just not going to cut it, man. As cool as that tip dunk was, let's do more of that for sure. But you gotta rebound more. Have to rebound more. That's it.
And I feel like a couple of the missed rebounds led to putbacks and like and ones. I think he had a couple bad fouls, it seemed like. But yeah, like a guy like Marez is going to come in, he's going to put a body on someone, he's going to grab every rebound he possibly can. He'll be out of position a couple times, he'll foul a couple guys, but I mean, his ceiling defensively is so much higher than anything Hummerkaus gives you defensively. And if Hummerkaus is shooting, I think 3 of 18 from three the past 3 games, the minutes got to dwindle, man. Like something's got to change, especially when Illinois as a whole is just not shooting great. Like something's got to switch up. And if Big T is, I felt like Big T was getting one touch every 10 minutes in this Tennessee game. Like he was just not involved. He sets the screens at the top, obviously, but he was just not involved. I don't know if you want to go to Merez because Merez was, I thought, decent in his couple minutes against Tennessee. And that's against some really physical bigs, just a really talented front court Tennessee has. Some lob threats that Merez was able to just diminish completely. I think Tennessee did 3 lobs and Merez pretty much blocked them all. So I think Merez is due for more minutes, especially if Hummerkaus just does not get going from 3 anytime soon, which there's a good chance he does. But if that doesn't happen, even if it does happen, I think Merez just needs more opportunities because that's a guy that is just so talented defensively. And he's kind of starting to come along offensively too. Like I think his floor is higher than it was just 2 months ago. So yeah, I think you got to start looking Merez's way a little bit more. Uh, when Hummerkaus is just that bad rebounding and that bad defensively. I mean, he's just out of position so much in these games, it seems like. And there is a spotlight on him. People are paying attention to him more because, I mean, he's the talk of a lot of Brad Underwood's post-game press conferences, but it's kind of deserved at this point. So yeah, I'm slightly leaning towards Team Merez here a little bit.
Is there any concern about Ivisic the last couple games? Just hasn't really been himself. Now, give him a lot of credit. He's really consistent on the glass. 12 more rebounds in this game. He's been in single-digit scoring for the first two times all year against Wisconsin and Tennessee, but double-digit rebounds in both games. That's been a real pleasant surprise for me with him, is that he's been a really, really high-level rebounder when kind of the scouting report from him coming overseas was he's tall, but he's not all that physical. He's not a great rebounder for his size. He's been a great rebounder against college players. He's been really good on that front. Offensively, he just hasn't been right the last two games, and you could tell that Tennessee, they got some big-bodied big guys, and he was, having a hard time, especially offensively. He took a really off-balance tough two when he was going against Felix Akpar in the very small amount of time that Akpar was actually on the floor. Played 9 minutes in this game because he got 2 fouls in like the first two, but there was one one-on-one post-up where he forced Ivisic into like an off-balance, one-legged, really tough shot that wasn't even at the rim. And yeah, Illinois didn't really get him involved all that much, but he wasn't, you look down there when he went down in the paint, just wasn't getting much position, wasn't making himself available all that much. Tennessee did a pretty good job taking away the pick and pop game. They tried to run it a few times, and Tennessee was playing small for a lot of the game with Milicic at the 5, so they were able to guard that pretty effectively. But I don't know. It just feels like he's been a little off offensively. You look at his numbers recently, 8 for his last 21 from 2, 10 for his last 28 from the floor. It just, you're not expecting to get the Arkansas level performance from him every night, but is there any concern there?
No, not a whole lot is what I'll say. I think part of it was just Tennessee's game plan. It's such a physical team. I thought they did a good job taking him away, and I thought Illinois just did a bad job of really keying in on him and looking at him in the post. There were some times like I thought he had decent positioning, but he was just not getting looks from KJ. Part of that is Meshack being so long and physical. He gets 2 steals a game. Like it's tougher to get the ball into the post. But you look back to like Wisconsin, and he just wasn't getting a whole lot of touches again. I think part of it is KJ taking off as a scorer. So much of what Illinois does is just based on KJ and whether or not he's shooting. I think Tomislav has just kind of been, I don't know, kind of been limited, kind of forgotten about in the offense a little bit. And I think when his time comes eventually, I think he'll be back to the form that we saw him in the first 7 or 8 or so games of this season. His touch has been a bit off. I kept saying the first few episodes we had this year that his touch just looked fantastic. Like his little baby hook, his low post game overall was pretty pure. And it hasn't seemed that way the past couple games. It's not something I'm totally worried about. I think the ball just hasn't been going in the hoop as much as it had been the first few games. So I think it's part of it's Tomislav's fault. Like he wasn't as physical as he could have been in the low post against Tennessee, wasn't as active as he could have been against Wisconsin. But I do really think part of it is just Illinois and its guards not looking at him as much. It's a team that's oriented on taking a ton of 3-point shots, which Tomislav is a part of, but hasn't been as much the past couple games. But I think eventually they'll get back to him. He'll get his touch back, and it's not something I'm totally worried about just yet.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's not a slump offensively. I think is going to last. I do think you're starting to see against some of Illinois' higher level opponents here that he's just not all that comfortable scoring on the interior. He's obviously not a low post big guy, but I do think some of the touch around the rim, some of the finishing on some of the looks that he's had, I think will come back, but I don't necessarily think that's where he's most comfortable playing. I don't necessarily think that's where Illinois' offense is structured to go to. I do agree. I'd like to see them use him a little bit more, just especially when things aren't going well offensively. He can be kind of a safety valve for your offense. Just throw it into him, play through him a little bit more, just because he's such a good passer. He can see the floor, put him in some action and really try to run some things to him, I think would help. And there has been times where I think there's been kind of dual blame in certain situations when Illinois plays teams that'll switch some things. You look at the Northwestern game, and you remember back to that one, there were 3 or 4 times late in that game where Illinois just didn't see him get a matchup on a guard, where I get that he's not a guy that's all that comfortable playing with his back to the basket, but when you get a 8-inch height advantage on a guy, that ball's got to go in there, because even if he's not necessarily going to take him all the way, teams are going to be terrified as soon as they see that send a double. He's going to be able to pass out of that, or he's just going to go one-on-one with that guy. I thought they actually threw it to him twice in the second half of this game with a guard on him, and he threw it right back out instead of doing anything with the ball. And I don't know if that's just a situation where he's in his head a little bit offensively, or he's just not comfortable playing that way. But I think there's kind of a shared, responsibility there that, you got a 7'1" big guy who's very offensively skilled. Use that more and take advantage when you have matchup advantages with him. And Illinois just hasn't done that. But in terms of his scoring dip here the last 2 games, I mean, he was the most consistent player on this team for the first 8 games they played, and he's still been really consistent on the glass. The defensive limitations are going to be there. I thought he was pretty poor defensively for the most part in this game, although he wasn't all that involved. Tennessee didn't get a lot at the rim anyway. But I think he'll be fine. Anything else from this game, or we can move on to bragging rights?
I say we move on. It was just, really a sloppy game from both teams overall. Really poor shooting night. The refs played a big part in it, I thought, in the first half at least. And then it just came down to late game execution, and Tennessee's a lot better than Illinois is at this point in the year.
I will say it does sting, just the fact that Chaz Lanier fouled out of the game at the under 4, and Zakai Ziegler played 6 minutes in the second half with foul trouble, and you can't win the game at home. That's the one thing that'll sting from this one, I think. I think we hit on everything, but that's tough. That's tough to get that situation.
I think there was a point, but like before he fouled out, when Ziegler had 4 fouls, like 6 minutes into the second half, I think Lanier came out at a different point, and Illinois just did not take advantage at all. And I thought that was kind of felt like a little nail in the coffin moment. They still stuck around, obviously, but that's a point in the game where you just got to take advantage of Tennessee's probably best 2 players being on the bench.
No question about it. Let's talk Illinois, Missouri bragging rights. We've still got almost a week until this game is going to happen. A very sizable break here. In fact, Illinois plays 2 more games the rest of this month, because they get another week off after that for the holidays and play Chicago State before restarting Big Ten play. But bragging rights, here it is again. This one just feels like this always looms there, and no matter what the situation is, you just kind of dread this game a little bit based on the way it's gone here recently. Now, Illinois blew out Missouri last year in one of their best performances of the season. 3 years ago, Kofi Coburn dominated them, and this Missouri program hasn't been in a great spot. Obviously, they went 0-18 in the SEC last year when Illinois rightfully blew them out. This year, they look improved. They're 29th in the net right now, top 50 on KenPom. They beat number 1 Kansas at the time at their home building a few weeks ago, actually a little over a week ago, 76-67, led that game by over 20 at one point. Should be an interesting game. This Missouri team, I'll be honest, I'm not buying them yet. I get they beat Kansas, but you look at the rest of their resume so far, and they've played nobody other than Kansas and Memphis. They lost at Memphis on opening night of the season. I have some questions about this Kansas team, but I also think that was one of those home spots that just set up perfectly. Kansas was coming off a game 4 nights before where they went on the road to Creighton and got beat up. That's not to say to disrespect this Missouri team. I think they're much improved from last year. I don't think this is like a team that you should be all that terrified of, or one that is a top 25 caliber opponent. I think they're a bubble team this year, and you play them on a neutral site. It's an important game for Illinois. I mean, we said that about Wisconsin a week ago. I think a lot of the things we talked about apply here. You don't want to lose this game and then non-conference play with only 1 win against a high major opponent and have 4 losses before you restart Big Ten play. But this should be an interesting matchup. Anything that stands out particularly here from bragging rights?
I don't know. Like, I agree with you. I think it is a pretty good team, but like you, I'm not sold on them. They have 9 wins this year. 7 of their 9 wins are against bottom 100 teams in the country. And then the Kansas win, they also beat Cal, who's like 125th in the country, and lost to Memphis, like you said. So they just haven't been tested a whole lot, whereas Illinois has had like 4 tests in a row pretty much against high major teams. But I don't know. The thing with bragging rights, you said it, like it's kind of just looms here as an Illinois fan of the team that's kind of been more talented the last 5 or so years at least, it's a spot where like Illinois has somehow managed to choke away 2 or 3 of those games. It's a game where like it just does not matter who's on each respective roster. The team that shows up in the Braggin Rights game is going to win the Braggin Rights game. Illinois could have Io DeSumo and Kofi Coburn be a number one seed. They'll still somehow find a way to lose to Missouri. And then at the same time, Illinois just could dominate Missouri like they did last year. So I don't know. Like I'll be honest, I haven't watched a ton of Missouri this season. I watched a bit of the Kansas game. They've got some familiar faces: Tamar Bates, Tony Perkins, both Big Ten transfers. Mark Mitchell had a couple decent years at Duke, but he's not a guy that you're really super scared of. I don't know. They have a lot of guys that can get to the rim. They've shot pretty well from three this year, but overall, I'm just like, I think Illinois does win this game. Uh, yeah, I don't know. I don't have a ton of takeaways, to be honest.
I think the two things that Missouri has done at an elite level so far this year: number one, turn teams over defensively. They turned Kansas over 22 times to help win that game. They're really active. They've got a lot of guys with high steal numbers, a ton of deflections. Dennis Gates has always been a coach that kind of plays that style defensively. He'll also mix up defenses quite a bit. So you'll get a lot of man, but he'll throw in his patented 1-3-1 zone occasionally. They'll pressure you full court if they feel like they can take advantage of that. I don't necessarily think this is an Illinois team that would struggle with that, with the way that they have KJ and Boswell in the backcourt, but that's something to look out for. A team that turns you over a lot, something that you worry about a little bit with this Illinois team, but at the same time, I thought Illinois was pretty dang good. For as much as they struggled offensively, 11 turnovers you live with against Tennessee, and really since early in the season, they've been really good taking care of the ball for relative to expectations. Other than KJ, who's had some high turnover numbers, and you're going to live with some of those, Illinois really hasn't turned it over all that much at all. But that's something Missouri's done really well. They've turned teams over like crazy. And the other thing is they're getting to the free throw line a ton. I mean, more than this Illinois team by a long shot. They're third in the country in free throw rate. They're missing their top scorer right now. He suffered a pretty semi-serious neck injury early in November. Caleb Grill, who's their best scorer and best shooter, was shooting 55% from three in 7 games, and he has been out. Wasn't as serious as they initially thought, but I'd be surprised if he plays in this game given what that injury was when it originally happened, although it will be almost a month since it. So maybe he returns. If he doesn't, though, this Missouri team's just been drive, attack the rim, get fouled. That's been a lot of their offense. Tamar Bates has been really good at it. Mark Mitchell's been really, really good at getting to the free throw line this year. His 60 free throw attempts so far. Anthony Robinson, their point guard, is kind of their most explosive, speediest backcourt guy, and he has lived at the free throw line this year, shot it at almost 90%. So those are the two things to look out for matchup-wise here. Let's hope that this game isn't called the same way as a Tennessee game was, because both these teams like to get fouled, and if the refs are going to call all of them, it's going to be another 2.5-hour game and a whistle fest. But part of that's on Illinois for staying out of foul trouble and not putting this Missouri team on the free throw line. Their rim defense will get challenged here by Missouri. That's why I do think Merez, depending on what you're getting from Tomislav, if Tomislav's not giving you a ton offensively, I think you could see more Merez in this game, because I do think rim protection and rim defense will be important here based on what Missouri has done. But yeah, I mean, Tamar Bates had a big-time game against Kansas, 29 points. It's like a late breakout for him in his career. He's a talented player, former high recruit, but that's a guy I don't know. He's going to be an inconsistent scorer. I would imagine that's probably where you go with Kylan in this game. I mean, he's 6'5", so he's going to have a little bit of size on you. Maybe Kylan goes to Anthony Robinson to try and stop him from getting paint touches for Missouri. Tony Perkins really hasn't been a huge factor for this team. He's come off the bench for them. I don't know. It's an interesting team. It's a lot of the same faces from the 0-18 team last year, but they've supplemented it and they're playing a different offensive style. I think it'll be a challenge, but Illinois should win this game. They're a better team, and Missouri really hasn't been very good. Other than turning teams over, if you can hold on to the ball against them, they haven't been good defensively. They've allowed a high rate of shots at the rim this year. let's score in this game if you're Illinois. It's a big one for them to get, and you're just a better team. I think Illinois needs to get this one done.
Yeah, I do too. I think they will get it done. How about a little Arkansas like 3-point shooting effort against Missouri? Like we talked about it a lot earlier, but I think at some point you just have to get going from three, whether it's Hummerkaus, whether it's Will Riley starts to break out again. Somebody's just got to do it. KJ's been pretty consistent. Thomas Love's had some good games, but he shot it a little bit less recently. I'd like to see Boswell get going. Like he shot, I want to say 38% last year, something similar the year before, and he's down right around 20% this year. So I think this could be a game for him to get going. I think Marez is an interesting matchup in this game because if you look at just probable matchups, Ben Hummerkaus might be on Mark Mitchell to start this game. And I think that could be potentially a nightmare for Illinois. Mark Mitchell's just a phenomenal athlete, really not a shooter. He just gets downhill, gets to the hoop. Saw that a lot at Duke the past couple years. If Hummerkaus is getting abused and he stays cold from three, I think this could be a big Marez game. Marez could come in, really limit Mark Mitchell, who could be an X factor in this game. So yeah, that's one thing I'm looking for. But overall, I think you said it like it's seemed this way the past couple years. Missouri's had some decent teams, some teams that went to the tournament, got like 8 or 9 seeds, but it feels like Illinois is just a better team every year in this matchup. And that's not always the case given the final score of these Braggin Rights games. But I say it every year, like I feel like Illinois is going to win the Braggin Rights game, and then somehow like Missouri gets out to a 10-2 start, and the vibe is just completely different. But it's a decent atmosphere. It's a fun game always right before Christmas. I'm looking forward to it. I say Illinois gets it done 82-75. I don't know. I think that's a decent prediction. I think Illinois gets it done, gets back in the win column like they did last year against Missouri.
I like it. Yeah, you mentioned there with Rickhouse. Missouri, they haven't been a good defensive rebounding team this year, and their front court is not very good in the rebounding department, but they have been top 40 in offensive rebounding rate, and their leading offensive rebounder is Mark Mitchell. And if Benham Rickhouse is drawing that assignment or is a guy that's tasked with putting a body on Mitchell and he plays the way he did against Tennessee on the glass, you're going to have to pull him because that's going to be problematic for Illinois. He's got to step up. I do think that a Merez-Tommy lineup can work in this game because Mitchell's a non-shooter. I actually think Merez matches up really nicely from Illinois' end as a defensive matchup for Mitchell and a guy who can match his athleticism and cut him off a little bit. Now you worry about foul trouble a little bit in that matchup, but to mitigate some of the rebounding and downhill impact of Mitchell while being able to sag off him on the perimeter, Illinois obviously is going to let him take as many threes as he wants. He's just a non-shooter. I think that lineup could breed more success for Illinois in this game, and you might have to turn to it more if Rickhouse is struggling with that one. I do think Trey White could see Mitchell a lot too in this game as well. I'm with you, though. I think Illinois wins. I think Illinois bounces back here. Illinois, under Brad Underwood, they've been really good at bouncing back from losses. And now you got 8 days to come off a really tough loss at home. You go to a rivalry game. Missouri already played their biggest rivalry of the year at home against Kansas, and it was an all-out effort. I'm sure they care about this Illinois game. They seemingly do a lot, but I think Illinois will be focused and ready to go here. And again, I still have questions about Missouri. It was a really impressive performance against Kansas. I think they have a chance to make the tournament this year, but that's not a team that you should be worried about here. I think Illinois should be able to win this game. I see this playing out a lot like Arkansas, where Illinois just controls it from the tip. I think it's a complete effort. I think Illinois installs a few new things offensively, really uses these 8 days to fix some things on that end. And I think you start seeing some better shots generated, some more shots go in from guys that have been slumping with Rickhouse and Riley, and maybe Boswell starts to hit some. And Illinois gets a nice little double-digit victory here against Missouri. I say Illinois 88, Missouri 75, 13, nice little 13-point victory for the Illini here, and that would feel real good heading into another week off before Chicago State in a low part of the schedule.
Last thing I want to mention is how about including the Ole Miss game? Illinois has played 5 SEC teams already this year. I mean, SEC is like the best conference in college basketball history at this rate. That's some pretty good scheduling.
Yeah, no question. It was weird when they scheduled all these SEC teams, but that's it's the perfect test for Illinois because the SEC is incredible this year. Really, it's and Illinois played three of its better teams, two of the best teams in that conference. They didn't get Auburn, which that would have been a tough one, but Tennessee and Alabama, and then Arkansas, who did end up beating Michigan at Madison Square Garden in crazy back and forth game. So that win already looks a little bit better for Illinois. Anything else you got?
That's pretty much it. I'm watching the Bears right now, down 13-0, just a disgusting effort, as it is every single week. So I don't know. I'm excited for this Braggin Rights game to get my mind off this.
Yeah, no, this episode will come out on Tuesday morning, the 17th. But when I texted you asking if you could record it during the Bears game tonight, I didn't realize the Bears were playing. I had forgotten. I'm not a Bears fan personally. I'm a Miami Dolphins fan. They're a joke too. But you said, I'm like, oh, shoot, I forgot the Bears are on. We can record a different time. And you're like, no, I don't care at all. Let's do it right now. So that'll tell you the state of the Bears franchise. Make sure to drop a follow on our Twitter at Champagne on Ice. Subscribe to the Field of 68 Podcast Network YouTube channel. And follow us wherever else you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google, anywhere you can find your podcast, we are there. And we will be back after the Braggin Rights game, another long break for Illinois right before the holiday stretch. But we'll break that game down. Hopefully a nice bounce-back victory for Illinois. And we'll start to preview the beginning of Big Ten play. Next week, since there won't be a ton to preview with Chicago State, I kind of want to take a look at the Big Ten picture as conference play is approaching, see where Illinois stacks up and where we still think this team could finish in the conference. So we'll do that next time. We'll break down Braggin Rights. Be sure to follow along with us all season long and enjoy the game on Sunday. We'll see you